right there helping each other. And it's usually Gavin helping Garrett out, the younger brother helping the bigger one out.
We would play like tag and hide and go seek and stuff. I would just tell him to go hide and he would just sit there. And I remember thinking, why isn't he moving? I already told him to just go.
A lot of parents struggle with trying to figure out the best way to talk about autism, and they put a lot of pressure on themselves.
We've talked to professionals, and at this point, rather than pointing out anything that might seem different to them, for Gavin, Garrett's just the normal brother.
He has such a strong feeling for her, and she has a strong feeling for him. She has a typical, I am an older sister with a pesty younger brother. Not because I have a pesty autistic brother, but because, you know, Connor's a pest sometimes.
In the 1970s, the rate of autism in the United States was about 1 in 10,000 children. Today, according to the Centers for Disease Control, that number has jumped to about 1 in 110. But the impact of autism goes way beyond the nearly 750,000 individuals ages 0 to 21 who have the neurological disorder. Autism affects the lives of all family members, perhaps none more significantly than siblings. The so-called typically developing brothers and sisters of autistic children are anything but typical. They deal with a range of grown-up responsibilities and challenges that tend to make them more mature and compassionate than other kids their age. To find out more about the many issues typicals face and what parents can do to help, we visited with 3 families who are currently raising an autistic child and talked with a grown sibling. We also talked with one of the nation's leading experts on this subject. Dr. David Celeberti is a clinical psychologist and board-certified behavior analyst. A well-known presenter at national autism conferences, Dr. Celeberti has been helping families for 20 years better understand the unique needs of siblings. What is it about the sibling relationship as it applies to someone with an autistic brother or sister that makes it so unique and so significant?
It is the first chance we have to form a relationship with an age mate. By the time you're 1 year old, you're spending more time with your siblings than you do with your parents. So there's just a lot of time that's shared, a lot of resources, a lot of space, a lot of dinner times, a lot of back seats of car rides.
Hey Garrett, how you doing, buddy? Where's your glasses?
We adopted our boys, Garrett and Gavin, from Russia about 4 years ago, and we made a trip over and brought back 2 happy little boys.
Doris and Don Hampton adopted their 2 sons as toddlers. Dealing with autism began with accepting Garrett's diagnosis.
And Garrett had all the indications of being a healthy child, very alert, very, meeting a lot of his benchmarks. And then, the autism started manifesting itself as he got a little older.
It was around his 2nd birthday, and the pediatrician mentioned that he had some tendencies. And we went to see a psychologist who 2 years later came up with the diagnosis. And I was kind of taken back. She had only seen him twice. And I was thinking, how could she possibly recognize that with maybe 2 15-minute visits with him? But she was right.
In contrast to other disabilities, when we see kids with autism, they look like typically developing children who behave very atypically. But probably more significantly is the fact that autism impacts upon communication and social relationships, and it affects areas that have a big impact on the sibling relationship. The ability to share a toy, to take turns, to show affection, to reciprocate, to have a conversation are all impacted by autism.
Garrett is, very high functioning. He's very spirited.
I need one more!
He has some impulse issues, so he doesn't know how to self-regulate his impulses.
Garrett, share with him, please.
Again, here's some tape for you.
There's some social ramifications that go along with that, but that's just part of being a kid and learning boundaries. But for him, it's, the learning curve's a little steeper on certain things.
From the start, the Hamptons have included Gavin, the non-autistic child, in visits with autism professionals. As a longtime elementary school teacher, Doris knows that early intervention doesn't need to be geared exclusively to the autistic child.
They're very close in age. They're 11 months apart.
I need to measure how long these...
We have Garrett who has autism included in as many things as possible, but at the same point, we don't want to exclude his little brother. And to them, they're just playing, and like if therapists come by or at school or wherever, it's more of like a play interaction, so they don't see it as therapy. They see it as just like they have a new friend to play with.
They say play is the work of the child. The Hamptons regard play as indistinguishable from therapy, knowing that the relationship Garrett has with Gavin can help him with relationships he'll have with others as he gets older.
Hey guys, let's share. It's okay.
I guess it's just who we are. We are down on the floor with them. We're at their level. You know, we're outside digging in the mud. So I think it has helped for them to learn how to do the play together rather than parallel play.
Should we put another bridge there?
No.
When he goes to sleep, he's asleep. When he wakes up, it's 100 miles an hour until the time he goes to sleep again. So there's no downtime when Garrett's on.
Experts agree that one of the best ways to help siblings deal with an autistic brother or sister is to educate them about the disorder early on. What to share is based on the child's level of understanding and stage of development, which means presenting the same information in different ways over time.
Okay, you're good now.
Explaining that Johnny has trouble sharing and here are things we can do to help him is more appropriate for young children than trying to define autism and its cause, which could be scary and confusing.
We haven't discussed it with either of them because they're just not at the point where they will be able to understand it. Like the Gavin, he just knows, and he knows Garrett's busy and excitable, but that's just the way Garrett is, and he doesn't realize that it's a problem or try to avoid it. They just love being partners, and Gavin just loves being a little helping brother and helping his big brother get through things.
And on the other hand, Garrett is he's really good at solving problems, and he's tying his shoes. He's very proud of that. And Gavin doesn't understand how he makes the bow and how does he make the knot. So he also looks up to Garrett. And he often says, "You're my big brother, you're my hero."
At some point, Gavin may take on the role of older sibling, but for now, the boys are simply best friends.
We spend so much time thinking about how we're going to change the behaviors of kids with autism, and sometimes we forget to realize that kids with autism are changing our behavior all the time. You talk about a 6-year-old with autism and his 4-year-old sister, and we'd be naive to not appreciate how much that 6-year-old with autism is modifying the behavior of his sister through his own behavior. In terms of when she tries to interact, does he interact back? So I think that one thing we have to do is really think about what skills can the sibling use that might break down some of those barriers, because the child with autism might not be ready, willing, and able to embrace this new relationship.
Good teamwork, guys.
A great way for kids to feel, quote, normal, especially as they get older, is to know other siblings of autistic children. The Hamptons joined an autistic support group, which provides important connections for themselves and for their children.
We get together and we share things that our children are doing or problems that we may have, asking for advice. We have really close friends. Some are educators, some have specialties of teaching autistic children, and then we have our grandparents right down the street. So without them, I think life would be a lot different. It's nice that there are two of us, because you do get burned out and you need a break.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy, but I don't think being a parent, no matter what, if you have typically developing children and children with special needs, it's never easy.
Whoa, look out, trains. Oh my goodness.
We've been wanting to be parents for a long time, and we're not going to step back now.
What factors influence the quality of the sibling relationship?
I think probably the most important one is the quality that the parents have with the child with autism. So I think if parents have a good, healthy, positive relationship with the child with autism, it's probably more likely that the siblings will.
We're a family. And as a family, we are together, we take care of each other.
How would you ever know that?
We knew it!
Parents can lighten the load for their healthy kids by acknowledging that they understand what they're going through and that negative feelings are normal. In the busy Rohan family, where there are 2 special needs children, Anne Rohan has created such an environment. That makes it easier for 12-year-old Laura Rohan to share her feelings and to maintain a positive relationship with her sister Kara.
Laura has probably had a very atypical upbringing. You know, she was sandwiched between two siblings with disabilities. I mean, her oldest sister with therapies and homeschooling, and then, you know, here comes a little brother, and he's in and out of the hospital and surgeries and doctors and therapists.
I think we have a relatively good relationship. Like, we tease each other and stuff, and we like to talk and stuff, and usually if there's something she's having trouble with, she can tell me, even if she doesn't want to tell anyone else.
Look, my arm.
Dr. Celebrity also reminds parents that even in families without autism, not all siblings connect with one another. One thing that is certain, however, is that the sibling relationship, typically the longest lasting relationship in the family, changes as kids grow up.
I can remember when Laura went to preschool, and it was like, oh gosh, this is going to be the end of it with Laura and Karen not together all the time. It's going to end. You know, Laura's going to go off and find her friends, and it has changed. I mean, it's not like they spend every waking moment together, and I thought that sisters should, but they've got a very, very good bond.
But what parent, with or without an autistic child, hasn't heard his or her child complain that things aren't fair? In a household where the world often does revolve around the autistic child, Laura has a perspective that you don't always see in kids her age.
When it does revolve around her, it's not for a very long time, and it's usually a positive experience, like, let's say, Special Olympics. I love going up, like, and watching her compete, watching her do great or even not so great. It's just fun watching her have fun and being with her friends and stuff.
Nobody probably gets as much time as they would like or that they want, but you try and you kind of have to prioritize things. You look and you say, what's important? What is it that I have to be there for? And then you make that happen.
One of the concerns in many families is that siblings can become auxiliary parents, assuming parental responsibilities at the expense of being a kid. While Laura has more responsibilities than most kids her age, the Rohans have been able to maintain a balance with the help of maternal grandparents, Ron and Peg Misavage.
Because sometimes they're just stretched so thin that it's difficult, and that's basically how we see our role as grandparents, is in a support role. We pick up slack if they need it.
Stretched thin, yes, but Ann is careful to carve out special alone time with Laura.
Laura and I are pretty famous for our nighttime conversations, going in and saying goodnight, and 45 minutes later I'm walking out of her bedroom. So we do a lot of talking, and she asks good questions.
So what other factors influence the quality of the sibling relationship?
Then there's the characteristics of the child with autism.
Here you go, Mom. Thank you, sweetheart.
Are they socially interested in other people, or are they not? Do they have a lot of behavior problems? Do they have some play skills, or do they have no play skills? Those are all important factors that contribute to the quality of the sibling relationship.
It's not uncommon for siblings to feel embarrassed by their autistic brother or sister's behavior in public, or to be reluctant to invite friends to the house. Experts say keeping a sense of humor is key.
Tara usually has a specific word that maybe for a week or 2 weeks she really, really thinks is funny. So it doesn't matter where we are. She could be up in her room, or she could be out in the middle of the mall. She'd say, like, I think this week's word is fidget. So she'll say the word, and then she'll start laughing, like, out loud. So that kind of gets people to stare a bit.
And then there's the sibling characteristics themselves, whether they're patient, whether they are flexible. When you're trying to interact with your brother or sister and it doesn't go so well, a lot of siblings that I've met over the years have blamed themselves. Other siblings have been more likely to say, he's having a bad day, or he doesn't want to play with me today, but tomorrow's another day. And those siblings are probably more likely to forge a positive relationship with their brothers and sisters.
But no relationship is perfect. For some siblings, there are feelings of isolation, confusion, anger, fear, or embarrassment about their autistic sibling. On top of that can be guilt for having those feelings. For Laura, it's more a sense of loss, something she acknowledges with some reservation.
Even though that she is older than me, I still have, it seems, most of the responsibility of like looking after all the kids in my family and stuff.
Let me hear it.
It's just not having her to be the older sister to help me through problems, like maybe in school or like things that happen. Because usually if you have someone older, they've gone through the same experience. But since she hasn't, I'm kind of on my own for it.
The reality is that a lot of families where there is an autistic child, and sometimes there's more than one, is that it can be a house divided. Dad goes to baseball games and mom stays home with the autistic child.
You have to change it up. I think that oftentimes we do see, for a variety of reasons, that one parent might be spending more time with the child with autism and the other parent might be spending more time with the siblings. Now we just encourage families to reverse roles frequently so that that both children, the child with autism and the child without autism, are getting to spend quality time with both parents.
There you go.
Thank you.
When we first visited with Scott Kamazine and Susan Trainer back in 2004, Connor was 5 years old and making great progress in overcoming autism. Intensive behavioral therapy had long been an integral part of the family mindset.
The right kind of behavioral program has such an enormous effect on the dynamics and the stability of the family that I can't overemphasize that.
All right, Coach.
11-year-old Kayla Kamazine has participated in her brother's therapy in a variety of ways, perhaps most importantly, as a role model.
We weren't looking at it as if this was going to be something we were going to separate out from our family time. This is what we were going to do as a family, and that's what we did as a family. So Kayla was a huge part of that, and we would emphasize that to her every step of the way. Look, you're his lead therapist. There's only one other person in this house who's even close to his age, who even looks like a typically developing kid that could look anything like what he could become. So go be you.
I think the role that I had was encouraging Connor, telling him that he could do it, encouraging him and praising him for when he would do things. With Connor, it wasn't an option of doing it or not. It was he had to do it for the sake of for my mom, for my dad, for our whole family. And I think that I played a big role in helping him.
I think you did too.
Kayla is acutely aware of Susan and my sort of emotional temperature. And yeah, it was very stressful for those years. I mean, wondering whether Connor would ever be able to go to school, let alone go to college.
What's going on, Gabe?
Nobody wants to play with me.
Nobody wants to play with you?
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's not true.
Kayla, unfortunately, has been burdened with the issue of having to watch and sort of make sure her parents are okay. And so she tries very much to sort of monitor us and see how we're feeling, and tries not to sort of add to that burden. And that's something that a young child should not have to do.
There are other ways in which siblings can be impacted by autism. For families involved in intensive home intervention, a room used for therapy might be off limits, or visits from friends might be restricted. Even in families like the Kamazines, where neighborhood children were seen as opportunities for additional peer interaction, Kayla sometimes felt overshadowed.
I've always wanted to be the center of attention all the time, and it was really hard because Connor got all the attention. He had therapists and my parents and autism specialists coming all the time to see him. And I'm like, well, what about me? Don't I exist?
Come on out into the living room.
I think children tend to focus on the good things. So they see these bright, active college students come into their house and they march off into the room, they close the door, they hear lots of praise, they see lots of treats go into the room, and they wonder, what's wrong with this picture, how come I can't participate in that? And they don't realize that their brother or sister with autism is working very, very hard.
What color is this one?
They might have this illusion that it's one big party, and when they actually get to participate or observe, they might realize that there's a lot of work happening. And in some cases, I've met some siblings say, it's kind of boring to me. Like, can I go now?
The Kamazine family motto is, normal is overrated. They share an enviable comfort level in being different and are able to laugh at rough patches in the road.
I would throw temper tantrums. I would scream and run around. The biggest thing I did was the piano keys on her dad's piano. I took the bottom edge of a fork, like the handle, and smashed all the little edges of the keys off. So now they're all chipped. And I drew on the piano keys, I drew on the walls. I was a very bad child.
You weren't bad.
I was bad in the sense that I didn't know how to get attention in positive ways. I would scream and cry and say, it's my turn, I want it now, I want it now. I've never been a very patient person. Up until now, I've never been a very patient person. I've gotten patienter.
I think you've gotten very
over the
patient.
year. Patienter.
I think you underestimate yourself.
It was really cool.
Siblings in support groups will often talk about the fact that their parents are so busy that sometimes they feel bad asking their parents for help because their brother or sister with autism needs so much assistance. So we talk about when you really would like to get your parents' attention, maybe there's a special word that you can use. It could be a silly word like tacos. When I say this, that really means that I really need you right now.
There's always the concern that you're spending so much of your emotional effort on the one child that the other child is going to be neglected. But we were aware of that, and we tried to incorporate Kayla as much as possible.
My mom actually got me a book. The title was Autism Through a Sister's Eyes, after I told her all about what it was like and how hard it was. It was a difficult time in my life, but my parents were always there if I wanted to talk to them unless they were working with Connor. When my dad was working with Connor, I would talk to my mom. When my mom was working, I would talk to my dad.
I have tried to compensate for the burden that I've put on Kayla by letting her know that as the older sibling, she also gets a lot of things that the younger sibling doesn't get. And Kayla knows quite well that, certainly compared to Connor, she gets anything she wants from me.
The Kamazines separated in 2006 when Connor was in first grade. The breakup was hard on Connor, who's particularly close to his dad. But both parents worked cooperatively, mindful that they wanted the kids especially to stay connected. Connor now attends a public charter school where he's enrolled in a typical classroom. He no longer needs an IEP, an individual education plan, but sometimes struggles socially.
It doesn't really matter to me that he has autism. I would love him no matter what. It's just hard for me to see him get, pushed around by other kids. He loves baseball and Webkins. The boys love football and wrestling. And it hurts because he'll have rough days at school and he'll come home and he'll be really upset, and that makes me really sad to see him sad.
I think it's important to sort of help siblings differentiate between a question that a peer might have, a friend might have, for instance, why does your brother not talk? Which is different from your brother's weird. So to really kind of separate out questions, legitimate questions, from taunts and teasing. And then to also think about the relationship. Is this my best friend who's making these comments, or is this a kid at the bus stop whose name I do not know? And I think that should also factor in.
And whose opinion you don't much care about.
Exactly.
She looks and seeks out people who embrace being different. Her friends are different, and they're glad to be different. They don't want to be normal. And she's uncomfortable using the word normal because she grew up in a household where really we didn't use the word normal. It's hard when you're in the moment to keep doing what you're doing and to keep putting that effort out. And you can't anticipate that down the road you're going to have anything. You just don't know. There's no guarantee. But that amount of work has given Connor the opportunity to be who he is, and also to give our family the opportunity to continue to do what we're doing without having autism be the thing that everything centers around, because it's just not that way for us.
Now it's just a matter of saying, okay, where do we go from here, and how do we just make sure that he's going to develop into whatever he can develop into. But we feel the exact same thing for Caleb.
What's unique about adolescent-age siblings in general is that they're beginning to imagine themselves as adults. Depending upon the needs of their autistic brother or sister, some may wonder about what potential caretaking or advocacy role they might be expected to play in the future. Others may worry about their own chances of having an autistic child. There's also a notable number of adolescents who, inspired by their own family's experiences, decide early on that they want to pursue careers in one of the so-called helping professions.
I went into this field knowing that other teachers had made such a big impact in Sam's life and in my family's life that I wanted to be able to fulfill that role for other families.
Lee Woodbury is studying to become a board-certified behavior analyst with the goal of doing for other families what her brother Sam's teachers did for her family.
I was old enough when he was born to be able to take on sort of a nurturing and a teaching role with him, and my parents were always involving my sister and I a lot in his education and what they were learning about him. My parents also figured out early on that they didn't want to be bogged down by a lot of the people who talk about it as devastating and depressing and, oh, it's so awful and tragic. It was more about what he can do and what he's learning, and that we're going to be proud of those things. What I've learned from him is that it's important to find the value in a person. When we go to social events and, people don't know us, they will approach my parents, they'll approach me, but they don't approach him. I think it would be nice to try to change those attitudes and help people feel comfortable in approaching people with disabilities.
If there's a common thread that characterizes all of these successful families, it's a positive attitude in the face of challenges. No one knows all the answers, and it's not essential for children to view their parents as all-knowing. Siblings benefit from seeing mom and dad not as superheroes, but as real people who are able to cope in spite of difficulties.
We tend to be so achievement-driven as a society that when you grow up in a family where learning to tie your shoes can be a fantastic, phenomenal event, you come to realize and appreciate things in life that we might otherwise take for granted.
It takes a comfort level to kind of develop an instinct and to say, okay, this is the way I believe it should go. This is what I believe, we should be doing. And to trust that instinct and to go with it.
I know that it was an enormous amount of work up front, but what it's done is it's down the road, the payoff has been enormous for the whole family.
We're being tested every day, but we're take one day at a time, and it's you get rewarded too. So it's as difficult as it's going to be. The rewards are going to be just as great, I think.
We hope we've given you some ideas on ways to open dialogue with siblings of autistic children in your family. For more information on helping siblings understand autism and for tips on encouraging positive relationships, check the links at our website, WPSU.org. For Pennsylvania Inside Out, I'm Patty Satalia. Thanks for joining us.
This has been a production of WPSU. A copy of the program you've just seen can be purchased through Penn State Media Sales at mediasales.psu.edu or by calling 800-770-2111.